Welcome to Pearls of Wellness. My name is Deidre Johnson, CEO and Executive Director for the Center for African American Health. For this episode, I'm joined by my friend, Toy Massey, who is the founder and CEO of the JEKL Institute of Global STEAM Equity and Access. Thank you, Toy, for coming to join me today.
Thank you, Deidre, for having me. This is so exciting. You're always up to good stuff.
Thank you. I am really excited to talk to you today. So my dad was a mathematician,
Okay.
scientist,
Excellent.
entrepreneur, and I grew up just thinking that we could always do anything we wanted.
Absolutely.
I also went to an all-girls high school, and so the fact that what you're trying to solve is a thing, it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
But I understand it. But I feel blessed that I didn't have to encounter it.
Right.
And then when I first met you and learned a little bit about your journey, I was just in awe. So why don't we start with you telling a little bit about yourself and also defining what is meant by STEAM.
So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share. Kind of like you, I come from this family where my brother and I were actually the fourth generation to graduate college. So it was never about, are you going? It was maybe where you are going. My dad was a engineer, but he took a different route to even acquire his skills in that space. Born and raised in Detroit as I was, we attended public schools. All of my educators, for the most part, with the exception of maybe Mr. Birchie and Mr. Nichols, who I clearly remember, my science teacher, and Ms. Mikowski, my mathematics teacher, they were all black. And so that struggle that young people in the Metro Denver area have, people of color, students of color have, with being sometimes the only one that looks like them in the classroom, that was not something that we ever had to consider a challenge. That being said, we were always encouraged to do whatever it was we wanted to do. I'm 7 years old and I decided I was going to be an obstetrician gynecologist because I'm standing over the kitchen sink with a pair of yellow latex gloves they were, and I was removing the innards from the whole chicken. Remember, you'd have the neck, the gizzards, the heart, and so I'm pulling it out and I'm like, what kind of doctor is this? This is like delivering a baby. And my mother says, obstetrician, or gynecologist, and it's usually, those two are together, obstetrician and gynecology. And so at that point, I knew I would be a physician, and that was my whole focus. And my brother, only 11 months difference between our ages, had decided he would do the same. And then we were blessed with parents who understood the power of the arts, and so we were immersed in activities that included sculpting with Elizabeth Catlett and poetry with Gwendolyn Brooks. We were, and we never were asked. I look at some of our parents today, you got to tell them we got programs starting, they'll say, well, let me ask them. We were never asked. My mother would just say, be ready. Saturday, you will be doing this. And then my grandmother, her mother, my maternal grandmother, lived in Greenwich Village, New York. And we would go there and spend a couple of weeks every summer. But before my mother would leave us, she would make sure that we were at the Broadway play, whatever was happening. Sometimes we had, tickets that sat us in the seats. Most times we had the $10 standing room tickets, and then at intermission we could sit. But I was able and blessed to see all of August Wilson plays. I was able to see Pearl Bailey and Louis Armstrong on stage and Hello Dolly and things of that nature. And it was seamless that the arts were a part of any and everything that we wanted to do. And so I moved through that space believing for some time that I would go into medicine. When I got in the 10th grade, there was a man by the name of Kenneth Hill. He was an engineer at Ford Motor Company. And as you know, Detroit is home of the big three industries, Ford, Chrysler, and GM. And he, kind of the same messaging I have today, could not fill the annals of his company with engineers of color. So he started the Detroit area pre-college engineering program, of which I was one of the first 15. That program has now since seen, 30, 40, 50,000 kids have come through, if not more. But we were the founding group, if you will. And at that point, I said, okay, I love engineering. How do I make a connection between medicine and engineering? Still not wanting to give that up. My grandmother became inflicted with breast cancer, and we actually lost her to it when I was in my second year of college. I did my undergraduate program at Xavier University of Louisiana, the largest number of African American youth students going into medical school, come out of Xavier University, and then of course completing medicine. So my brother had gone there first, and he said, "You got to come down here." I had applied to everybody else, had no intention of going south. Best decision I ever made. So when I completed my program at Xavier, I actually was moving into the graduate program of engineering with a concentration in nuclear engineering at Howard University.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yeah. So, yes. So, yeah, that was the deal. So I was a physics major undergraduate. And I got accepted to the graduate program of engineering at Howard University. And I wanted, however, to be able to make the connection between engineering and medicine. So it was almost seamless that I would go into the nuclear engineering program because I could work through the nuclear medicine program out of Howard University's medical school, which is right down the street there from the engineering school. And so that's kind of where that went. And I wrote this wonderful thesis around how we basically would be able to kill the malignant cells without killing the normal and healthy cells. We can cure any cancer. The problem is killing the healthy cells at the same time. So with measuring the dosimetry effects of using double node microwave antenna and intraoperative radiation therapy with electrons and intraoperative hyperthermia, we were able to publish a work that said we could take what looks like two knitting needles, insert them into a malignant tumor, heat them from the inside like a microwave stove would do a piece of anything in its oven, and we would shrink that tumor from the inside out. And it was probably not until maybe 5 or 6 years ago I was doing a video session with another wonderful person here in Colorado, Danielle Schutz, and she asked me what was my why. And I talked about that, and there was a woman in the audience who said, "It is because of your research that I'm alive today. I actually have the shunt right now in this tumor." And so with all of that being said, I had never been told I could not. I had never been told this was impossible, this was improbable. What I did realize and see, however, was that there wasn't a lot of representation. And as I graduated and moved immediately into nuclear engineering through the then Nuclear Regulatory Commission, it was the same thing. First day on the job, in an industry organization that had been hiring engineers since the dropping of the atomic bomb in the Second World War, I step in, and I'm only the third African American female engineer that's been hired in over 40 years. And the first thing I'm asked on the job is, "Are you the new secretary?" And so hearing my mother, an educator, her wonderful voice was pretty much in my ear. You can pretty much say anything with a smile. And so with that smile, I said, "No, I am not the new secretary. However, if you're getting coffee, I take mine with 2 creams and 2 sugars, and you can bring it over there to that wonderful big office that I'll be assessing you in shortly." And so he didn't realize I was his boss. And so that was pretty much the journey. And it looked like that for the next many years. I switched industries at one point because I left the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on a dare from my brother, who said I would always wonder if I could get into medical school. And I said, "Anybody go to med school? I finished engineering." And so the bet was on, and I applied to and got accepted to and went to medical school. And then in the third year, there was a research team of physicians, and they needed to calibrate this small biosensor as they were trying to figure out what amino acids were immediately being emitted in a stroke and causing slurred speech and droops and all of this. And so they couldn't do anything without an engineer, and I was the engineer in that class at the time. And so I realized, one, I had won the bet. The bet was never that I finished med school, it was that I couldn't get in, and I did. And then the second was that, wow, nothing happens without engineering. So with that being said, I returned to the field, and immediately began to see, even after all these years, it still looks the same, this disproportionate representation of women in this space and people of color in this space. So ultimately, I left. Aerospace brought me to Denver. I was working for one of the large organizations, Raytheon. Said I was only going to be here a year, came to stand up a team that would report to me. Fell in love with Denver for a lot of different reasons. Primarily, you can own all this house, at least at that time, for this little bit of money. So, okay, got to stay here. And then, of course, as Kennedy, my daughter, started moving it through school, it became less and less likely, especially at high school, that we were going to leave before she finished. But the platform, it had never changed. You still have the fewer women in the space, and they might be able to recruit, but they could never retain. And then obviously not very many people of color. And so that's what breathed life into JEKL for me. And we started as the JEKL Foundation for STEAM Education. The 4 letters, JEKL, are the acronym for my mother's 4 grandchildren. Kennedy, 3rd year at Howard University in engineering. She's the K. Lauren finished from Spelman. She's the L and the N. John Christopher is the J. He's at Morehouse now, going into his 3rd year. And then Eric, he is actually at North Carolina A&T. So they will be the 5th generation to come through our family to complete college. And it's interesting, all of them will be coming out of historically black colleges and universities. But with that being said, that was really the driver. I was like, if I'm going to get them, I'm going to have to go get them. And from the time I left corporate, I had to first realize, and you know this, the only thing nonprofit, ladies and gentlemen, about nonprofit is the tax status. This is a profit and loss center. I had to get that clear because I was doing everything for free. And I'm like, but aren't you supposed to just give it all away? And then you realize, how am I going to keep my own lights on? And, and so there was a major paradigm shift in how to actually do this. Your passion is there. It has to be there, but you have to run this like a business. And in the end, your models may change, your approach may adjust, but your vision and mission, at least for me, has never changed. And that was to embrace what we call the uninitiated child in order to change the face of STEM forever. And knowing that access without real support doesn't provide at all any opportunity, we realize we've got to be that support that closes the gap between the access and the opportunity. That was a lot.
No, that was fantastic. So for someone who might not know what STEM stands for, what would you say?
So it's really interesting because you hear this acronym all the time. And the truth of the matter is, the S being for science, T for technology, E engineering, and M math. You tend to believe that these are separate disciplines in and of themselves. But the truth of the matter is, these are interdependent disciplines that don't exist one without the other. Technology is just science brought to life. Engineering is the solution in problem-solving piece. Math is the language we all speak. And we use the arts, and always have, as that thread, that cohesive thread that brings all the disciplines together. So historically, those in this field have never had to call out, well, the arts, don't forget the arts. But now, of course, you hear people saying, but what about the arts? Well, the arts have always been there, both performance arts and fine arts. And, you don't design anything before putting it on paper with whatever tools and medium you use to illustrate it before you breathe life into it. But yeah, so the STEM disciplines, and our kids have been these things all of their lives. Teachers, I call them doctor, I call them engineers. So many times they don't realize when they're taking pictures that they're really performing like physicists, if you will, and measuring focal lift. They don't know when they're dancing and doing ballet, again, physics. I had to tell some kids who said, well, I want to grow up and I'm going to be a football player. And again, I said, well, you're going to be a physicist and a basketball player. You're going to be what do you mean? I'm like, you're talking about projectile motion. You're talking about thrust. you're talking about drag. You're considering all of these things when you get ready to throw that ball. And so I got this wonderful little card from those 4 young men who their teacher was astute enough to capture their comments in their own hand and send it to me. And they said, "Thank you, Ms. Toy. I never thought of myself as a physicist. So now when people say, 'What are you going to do?' I'm going to tell them I'm going to be a physicist who throws a football." So, well, there is no disconnect there. Our kids are extremely innovative, especially when you go into communities where resources are limited and you look up and you say, okay, well, they might not have had, a well-manufactured basketball rim, but they figured out if I kick the bottom out of this crate and I nail it in some way up to this telephone pole, I have a device, an apparatus, something that I can actually use as a basketball rim. And you see this all of the time, and you're finding in many communities that have the least resources some of the most ingenious innovations that are coming out of there. And so, yeah, that's what I do. I go into these places where they hear no more than they hear yes. They don't always have the tools to present in the most sophisticated way the deliverables, but you might not be able to afford or have access to a technology-laced rocket. However, if you got some baking powder and some white vinegar, I can help you make something explode and launch, and that's really how we got started. I call it kitchen cabinet science. And that's there that they begin and they start to see themselves, and we remove any fear of doubt around the any negative connotation around fail and how fail is not failure. In fact, in the engineering disciplines, it's the negative data that drives us to get the positive. Like I tell my brother, you'll be practicing medicine forever, practicing. But when we cut the ribbon on that bridge and we tell people 10,000 cars an hour can come back and forth, we don't have the luxury of fail. This is real time. The fail took place prior to the build. And it's something to hear kids start to say that, well, we just got to redesign it. It didn't work, but we just redesign it. Imagine, Deidre, if we could do that as just people, and we would be so much more forgiving of not meeting the immediate mark, or at least give ourselves the grace of recognizing that it's in the imperfection that the perfection is born. And so that's really, how I move in this space.
And whose lens on defining failure are we even listening to?
Exactly. That is exactly right.
So take me through the age ranges you work with, and what are some of the things you do with younger folks and older folks?
It has really changed and evolved, truth be told. We initially started thinking in the K through 5 spaces and moving in those cohorts with the different types of hands-on and interactive activities that got the kids excited, got them thinking, got them challenging themselves. But then we realized that kids learn what they live, right? And if we expose them, regardless of the age, they will immediately start to embrace, gain confidence, and pursue some of these areas, hopefully, as careers or entrepreneurial pursuits. I know with Kennedy, my own daughter, she was the baby, and I'd take an empty 15-ounce water bottle and she'd be in the tub and I'd force it below the surface of the water and watch all the air bubbles move out as the water rushed in, and I'd say, science. And that's all I'd say. And eventually that's what she'd start to do, science. And then I'd take, ketchup and a glass of white milk, and I'd add the red ketchup to the white milk and stir it up. And I say, pink, science. So you can imagine in most restaurants, they were glad for us to leave and hope we never come back because our tables were always a mess. But that's what it is. I tell parents, science is messy. Movement in these spaces is messy. You've got to allow them to understand it. If they take the spoon and you got a pot and they're banging on it, you're talking about rhythm and vibrations and frequency of sound. Now you're you're talking about pitch, all of it's science. That's where the arts again come in, right? And so we have programs that support the middle school age. And it may be some of the same types of activities, but we've made it a little more sophisticated and align it with areas and subjects that they should at least be exposed to. One of the things I realize as we move into this space, like right now, we're working with the Mind Trust organization in Indianapolis Public Schools, and we have taken our Math Madness program there, and we realize that we've got kids who have been without math teachers sometimes for a year and a half at a time. We've got fifth graders that don't know how to use a ruler. They know what it is, but even as they put it down, they don't know how to leverage it to make a very straight line. And so and they catch on quickly. You know, one of the things that JEKL does not do is focus on the gaps. We don't focus on the shortcomings. We focus on the goal. And so we encourage them to get there. We have programs for high schoolers, programs that are specific to girls. We got a whole leg called Think Like a Girl, where we make the connection between some of the non-traditional STEM professions and the STEM disciplines, i.e. a young lady telling me, well, I want to go into cosmetology. And I'm going to tell her about the largest organ on the body being the skin. And we're going to talk about the genetics of hair with that, recessive gene for straight hair and the dominant gene for the hair that grows towards the sun, and making those connections and melanin and the importance of it. And even understanding, in all of these spaces that there are no accidents. Those of us who may have the single gene or the trait for sickle cell, historically, that the danger, of course, is the parent have a trait and the other two, and then you have a child that has both, and now they have the full-fledged sickle cell disease, if you will. But if you just have that one, imagine you can go into West Africa and not worry about all those horrible shots you must get before you arrive, because that gene protects you against malaria. So it's not always the negative. And then we work very, very hard to make the connection between the work we do and those who look like the kids that we go after, Black and brown kids predominantly. Many times they don't know that every day they use these cellular devices, and they don't know our role and our impact in all of this, including the caller ID, with Shirley Jackson and her algorithm there, including the cellular AT&T use of the algorithms that developed us to be able to even have cellular phones, even dealing with some of our digital video equipment and the early pioneers in those spaces looking with people and scientists that look like us. So many times we don't realize that NASA's land satellite that goes all over the globe to tell us where drought is coming and where we're going to have agricultural challenges, that's because of Valerie Thomas and her algorithm. We don't know that we take pictures of the Earth from space because of George Carruthers and his telescope. And these are Black people, and they're so involved in our everyday quality of life. We have lights right now because of the carbon filament that Lewis Latimer improved upon for Thomas Edison. His thing was going out every few seconds, He had to go get the brother who then eventually lit up all of Paris, in Washington, D.C. But those are the connections that we make in all of the activities that we do. Now we are moving into the workforce talent development in those STEM disciplines, recognizing that many of these types of professional categories along here don't necessarily require the 4-year degree. I'm not going to ever discourage us from getting the 4-year degree, but we do realize that we can move into some of these spaces and provide support to organizations who can pay a livable wage without it if we have certain credentials in place. obviously the ideal would be get you up, get you working, reskill you, upskill you, shift the paradigm that you have to work 2 and 3 and 4 types of jobs just to make ends meet, to I can work this really one good job and have a quality of life that probably will see me go and advance by getting the additional degree. So we are 2 generational in this approach. We bring the kids in, and then we hope to bring in the parents as well. I guess I was really first introduced to that concept with Dr. Dorothy Height when I came out of graduate school at Howard University. I went to work with the Negro Council of Negro Women, and Dorothy Height had a grant with the Chevron Company and National Council of Negro Women, and we did what was called Saturday Math and Saturday Science. And the only requirement for the young people wanting to attend was that they bring a parent or an adult or someone that supported them in these disciplines. She could see then the impact and the power of that. If the parent or the guardian is sitting around the table with this young person who is engaging in this work and is not only excited about doing it, but curious about pursuing it, guess what happens? That parent becomes curious and excited and knows how to encourage that young person, and perhaps even then pursues some opportunity to improve their quality of life. And so we're working very closely to create these ecosystems now with industry and education and families, and to build this 2 generational impact and all of that.
Toy.
It never ends.
No, that's fantastic, because I knew about some of it, but I didn't know about the whole picture. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here, so I mentioned to you that my dad was a mathematician. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he drilled into my sister and I is that the problem we have in this country is that white children are raised with expectation and black children are raised with hope. And so whatever you girls do, make sure you're about the business of turning hope into expectation for our kids. And look at you.
My father would say hope is not a strategy.
Exactly.
And that's really what your dad was saying. Hope is not a strategy. It sounds good. We want you to be inspired to aspire, but you got to put some work in this game. Mm-hmm. I remember when I came out of graduate school and I have this master's degree in nuclear engineering. I worked for the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and we would go into these power plants and we would do what was called unannounced inspections. But I remember my father telling me, let me have a talk with you seriously and one-on-one. I said, okay. He said, I think it's awesome. You know, we are all very proud of your accomplishments. But when you go into that plant, there will be people, many who look like you, who may have never even graduated high school. You and all that master's degree means nothing on that floor. They can tell you where every valve is. They can tell you where every pump is. They can tell you how this place runs. They built it from the ground up. The point he was making was the ground is level at the cross. There's honor in all honorable work. Respect them there for what it is they do, and understand that they are critical to what it is you need to do. So when I would come in, you were not supposed to fraternize at all, because you're on an inspection that could shut this place down to the tune of $1 million loss a day. So you're not the friend. But from the time I would walk in, the word passes, this is black girl on the floor with this USNRC jacket. And you'd see them, they'd be all along, aligning the balconies and overlooking the floors. You're walking into this power plant, and they doing like this, like, we got you, we see you, we got you. And the my white counterparts, usually older white male leadership, and they just could not be, how is it that you're able to get everything done? They were like, what you need, sister, what you need? And it was never more powerful for me in those moments to know what family looked like among people you've never met before in your life. And they respected and were proud of what it was I was doing. I was respectful and proud of what it was that they had done, and the fact that they were going to make my lift easier, primarily because I recognized how heavy theirs was. And that's one of the things that I talk to not only my daughter and nieces and nephews, but the young people that we work with constantly. We make it very clear to them, your pursuit of education and higher education is not even about you. It's about those who could not go, those who made this pathway available to you, to me, to make it available to you. So failure is just not an option, whatever it looks like. Success looks like. Failure is just not an option. Today, I continue to meet with organizations in around the city and boards and things, and talking about, well, what are we going to do about youth violence, and how do we prevent it? And I think earlier we were just saying, this idea that kids fix themselves is ridiculous. Kids learn what they live. If we want to focus on what the child is doing, that's a symptom. If we want to focus on how to prevent this from happening, we got to go to the address that they came from. But one of the biggest things I remember was growing up in a community in Detroit where everybody was, I don't know if they didn't have written permission, but they certainly had an understanding. If you were out of order, your neighbor was going to check you. Everybody's goal was to see you live another day. Everybody's goal was to see you be successful. And so understanding that kids do foolish things as kids do, brains are developing, common sense is not common. We had neighbors, Mr. Shirley, Miss Tompkins, Miss Washington, Mr. Harris, all of them were a part of our growing up. And I think we're missing that in some of these spaces. But one of the things I have never done and will never be is afraid of those children that look like me. I don't care what the tattoos, the look, none of that. All I see is the heart. And so it's not uncommon for me to come into a community setting, and I have to say from the beginning, young man, I look at you, you're clearly your mother's most handsome son, probably the smartest one. I thought you might be a great leader until I see you can't keep your pants up. And then it's always, oh, ma'am, I'm sorry, auntie, I'm sorry. And they will do that. Somewhere we have stopped challenging our children to be better than the best. We used to hear, and I never was one to repeat that, you got to do twice as much, to work twice as hard to be half as good. And I always was, like your dad, a mathematician in there. I'm like, well, then I would rather do 4 times as much to be 100% as good. And maybe we need to shift the paradigm and have, the others consider that they need to be inspired to work harder because of the work that we do. We're in some really trying times right now. For us, in many ways, the day hasn't changed, just the date. Some of the changes that have happened have been more about us trying to assimilate than us understanding there are always going to be 2 sets of rules. So in this space, this is where excellence is only accepted. Whatever that looks like, it has to be your best. If that C is all you can bring home, it better be because you worked your butt off to get it. We don't, any longer seem to feel responsible for those that, aren't necessarily in our address, living in our own homes. But we've got to get back to that. And so, again, I was talking about the youth violence prevention piece. The things to do and get them off of these digital devices. And if they're going to use the digital device, let's direct what they do with it. What it is that they're actually using them for. But one of the best things we could do is to get them engaged in maker spaces. Aligning them with mentors that may or may not look like them, but who have their best interests at heart. Understanding that everybody's not out to get you. And some of the stuff you getting called on, you deserved it. You earned it, But where you are today, if it's not where you want to be tomorrow, stop looking at yourself in the past. And don't allow people to hold you to yesterday. Keep moving forward. And so we do a lot of that in this spaces. One of the things that I want to be able to do, one of my good girlfriends, Kimberly Howard, and she's over the probation for the state of Colorado. And I said, and she's a visionary. And so we're talking about how do we bring STEM programming into these spaces, to get them excited, to let them know something's waiting for you when you walk out of here, and it can't happen without you. You've got to show up, and you've got to show up your best self, and that's all we're expecting, and that's all we are accepting, and that's how we talk in those spaces.
And you're so much more than you may have listened to in the
Oh
past.
my gosh. And as my mother would say, everybody can't go. So she told me I bring in stuff the cat would leave outside. She said, everybody can't go. But you realize that. No announcements necessary. Just quietly move to a different space. And sometimes it's difficult for our kids to get off the block in that, space. We've been absolutely 100% blessed through an outdoor Colorado grant that allowed us to take kids on the Amtrak up to Winter Park, up the gondola, have them, tube back down the snow, take them whitewater rafting, take them, zip lining, and make all the connections with the engineering and the science, the technology that makes these activities happy activities available to them, and they can see how design thinking is used to create these spaces, and how, and we challenge them, okay, so now that we've done this zip line, let's go back and build one, a simulated one, scale it down, and how would you improve upon it? What areas of this activity did you see opportunity for improvement? Where were the risks involved? So, they start to think analytically, they start to think strategically, they start to just, envision things that are not in place today, understanding the difference and even the cross roads between the innovator and the inventor. And they may be one and the same, but often they are not. Understanding the power of patenting their idea and owning their genius. What does that actually look like? So it's amazing to watch. But any number of activities that is available, that they do, and we want them to see the difference. We had a young lady whose experience with metal utensils in a restaurant found her grandmother, who had put her spoon in the bowl and started talking to family, but when she picked it up, she didn't blow on it, so the heat from the spoon obviously caused a blistering and a burning of her inner lip. And so then her invention or her innovation was to create a spoon that was thermal indicating. So if it was blue, it was cool, or between this temperature. If it was yellow, it was this color. If it was red, it was hot. But those types of things are the encouraging pieces that we, make the connection between the STEM disciplines and where they are today, and how they can actually leverage this and create some amazing things to change the world forever.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I feel like I've talked, but that's what I do. But yes, it's very exciting. Thank you for the opportunity to share. There's never enough of us to support the impact that's needed, but we are impacting, and our arms are open for. The mental health component is critical. The work that they do, the feeling that they're giving back, the feeling that they're creating opportunities not only for themselves, but for the betterment of ultimately mankind, it lifts some things off of them. It changes the way they see things, the way they talk to one another, and the grace they allow themselves when things don't go as originally planned. Mm-hmm. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you for all that you're doing. I mean, you're truly not only transforming lives, but transforming mental models and probably generations.
Oh, I hope so.
And you could have easily just reached your pinnacle and been comfortable, but you hit pause and you decided to come change the world. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you for coming to join me.
All right.
And I hope you'll come back, because I want to hear some more about what's next, because it sounds like you are truly becoming global.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you're just half as inspired as I was by my conversation with Toy Massey. I challenge you to think about, what are those things that you might have considered as failures that were really successes? What are those things you can do to support your children, your family, and your community to reframe how we're doing things, to do them better and with excellence to care for our community moving forward? Thank you for joining Pearls of Wellness. My name is Deidre Johnson. Thank you to our sponsor at Colorado Housing and Finance Authority.